Good.
What type of questions do you ask in an interview?
So she's asking you. So from being international, what types of questions are you allowed to ask during an interview? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had so Salvador Lopez came in from the Maquiladores, and he was just saying, in Mexico, you can ask anything. You can ask about religion, how many kids you have. Do you think about having any more kids before they want to know the entire person. Where in the United States, it's not quite that open. Yeah, and my friend Corey came. He was an employment lawyer, and she was just cringing with the idea that we could ask those different things in Mexico. So
that's a really good question, actually. It's a really good question. And it's funny going from the U.S. perspective and working internationally, because I used to cringe at all these questions being asked, even in Australia and in New Zealand. They would be like, well, this resume doesn't have a picture on it. What's going on? We need a picture. I'm like, what? You can't ask for that. You can't ask for pictures. You can't ask. But to be quite honest, and I haven't worked in every country, but I've worked in a lot of them. And the U.S. has been the most restrictive in regards to employment law. And so if you grow up in the U.S., you're probably a lot more PC than a lot of businesses around the world, because they can ask a lot of questions. And it's a lot more, it's a lot more PC to ask that. I mean, it's amazing what I was asked, even in Australia. So you're, here you have really, really strict rules about, age, even in California, you even have more rules and regulations about what you can and cannot ask. And for example, I believe in California you can talk about, you can ask on an application how much you were making before, because that's restrictive. And so you're right. There's a lot more leeway all around the world in regards to what you can ask. Now, having said that, really what's important, think about that in regards to what you're asking in interviews. Is it really important about asking about family? Is it really that important to be asking, for a picture of yourself on a resume? It's not, right? And so I think you really need to keep your questions, and I think it's just a professional courtesy around the world, it doesn't matter where you are, to keep your questions about the job. Keep your questions about what's critical to the job success. And so I think that will keep you out of trouble no matter where you are around the world. And actually that's what's important anyways, right? You don't need to know about, if they plan to have a family in the next, 2 years. That's really, what you really want to know is, can you do the job? Are you going to be able to do the job? Will you make this thing work? Are you the right fit? That's really the most important. It's not all this personal stuff that actually clouds, muddies the water. Make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Hey, what about excuse me? What about values? We talked a lot about core values, and then us, trying to align what our core values are, and it's somewhat, when we're looking at it, it's somewhat to the core values of the company. Internationally, are people, the companies, are they as focused on core values, mission, vision, core values as we are here in the States?
Yeah, I believe they are. I mean, again, it all depends. I mean, there's some massive international companies that are globally, and they the more that you look at big global internationals, they really do operate quite in the same way, no matter where they are around the world. And so you'll see them focus on core values and competencies. And and bringing the people in that are going to be match their core values. So are they going to be results orientated? Are they going to be able to influence within a matrix organization? I don't know if you guys have dealt or talked about matrixed organizations, but the larger the organization is, the more prone it will be to be matrixed, which means that you may have more than one boss. You might have several bosses. And in other words, you also may not have a team. You may have to basically have a loner team where you have to influence them. You may not have direct responsibility, so you have to influence also people around you. So how good are your influencing skills? And so they'll be looking for those kind of things on a global basis, not just in the U.S. One thing that does come to mind though is I'm just trying to remember, Hostetler's Power Index. Have you guys talked about any of that power indexes?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't really talk a lot about that. They may have picked it up in their international class, but not so much in this class.
Yeah, I don't like to stereotype any kind of country, because people are different all around the world, but it does ring a bell. If you guys ever come across the power index, what they call power distance index, where, for example, in Malaysia or China, you have a large power distance index, which means that you don't question your boss as much, right? But if you go to a place like South Africa or Australia, they question their boss quite a bit, right? And so it's okay to question your boss. It's okay to state what's on your mind. Matter of fact, you're encouraged to state what's on your mind. And so those kind of things actually come through in an organization. And so depending on where the organization's based, you'll see those power distant indexes come up. So if you're working for a large Chinese company, you can't necessarily, and again, I would refer to the gentleman, or I don't know if it's a lady or gentleman that's from China there, but you don't necessarily question a lot of times the people that are the boss or the on top. Matter of fact, you have to do it through influencing, and if anything, you do it in private. You don't ever do it in public. It's a really important thing, and that goes through the culture of the business. Now, in Australia, where I used to work, you would be questioned all the time, and you better be ready to answer in front of a large set of people. And it was okay to have really outward conflict in a boardroom or in a meeting. And matter of fact, it was, that's how they got their answers. And so you better stand your ground. You better be able to answer some pretty aggressive questioning. And that's just their culture, right? And how many people have seen the legislative or the government work in I guess their equivalent to Parliament or Congress in Australia? Has anybody seen that? I mean, they yell at each other across the aisle, right? In their open sessions, and that's just normal, right? That's just the way that they get their point heard. You don't even have that in the U.S., right? So if you look at the power distance index of the U.S., we're actually right in the middle. You would think that in America we speak our mind, right? Well, not according to this index. We do to a certain point, but not like other countries. Does that ring a bell as well?
Yes. Thank you, Morgan. Hey, so Larry, what about the when we spent a lot of time recently looking at performance evaluations.
Oh yeah.
You know, and everyone everyone does it a little bit differently, even here in the States, where some are 360, some are self-evals, you know, some are you do what you thought you did this last year, and then the employer meets up with you. And so, like, especially in Australia, how does that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it has to do with the culture of the business, has to do with how open feedback is. So I think feedback is really an important point in any organization. To perform, you have to have feedback. Matter of fact, leadership needs feedback. That's a really important point. So I'm not a big fan of performance evaluations in 360. Especially, I like the 360 tool, but I like it for development. I don't like it for performance, or I don't like it for selection. And what happens when 360s are used for performance is, if it's a true 360, your boss rates you, the people that report to you rate you, you rate yourself, and your colleagues rate you, right? So you may have 10 raters that are rating you, and you're rating yourself. Now, if it's tied to performance, or if it's tied to my bonus, or if it's tied to selection, really, really important things like that, then what happens, generally speaking, is that everybody will rate you just a little bit better than really what you are, okay? And you'll never get really critical feedback. And a 360 tool is very, very good, but it's only good if it's used for development purposes, okay? That's a really important point when it's 360. If it's used for coaching and development. I've seen it misused in performance, and what happens is it's always gets skewed, and you never get really good feedback. Everybody thinks you're wonderful because they don't want you to miss out on that bonus. And they don't want you to miss out on that performance rating. And so I'm going to give so-and-so, you know, he's really not that bad, because I don't want him to lose that thing. Now, if I know that this 360 is only going to be used for development purposes, then I might tell you that, you know, when you address the whole group, you shouldn't yell so much, or you shouldn't be condescending, or you shouldn't use humor all the time. All that feedback that you should get, I might put that in there if I know it's for development purposes. And so now, again, performance evaluations, I really like the piece where I have to rate myself. So I rate myself, you know, and then I say why I've done a good or a bad job this year. And then I have a one-on-one session with my supervisor. And we talk about how well or how I could have done better at certain things. And we have an open and honest conversation. And I tie it to compensation, but I do that as kind of a secondary thing to the feedback. People that want to perform, they really are concerned more about the feedback. Everybody cares about compensation, but at the end of the day, you really need to hear the feedback. And so, and I don't think that performance evaluations should only occur, you know, once a year. I actually think it should be an ongoing discussion with your supervisor. I always say that performance evaluations that are surprise are the worst kinds of performance appraisals, because performance appraisal should never be a surprise. You should be getting feedback throughout the year. Same with a termination, right? You know, terminations that are surprise, terrible, to be quite honest. A person should understand that, you know, look, and given a chance to perform, as you know, throughout their job. And if they're, you know, I have a supervisor walk in and say, look, I want to get rid of so-and-so. He's not doing his job. Okay. Have you talked to him? Have you had discussions with him? If their answer is no, then a lot of times I'll say, no, you need to give a person a chance to perform. Give them the chance to do better, meet expectations. And if you've given them that chance and they still can't do it, well, then, you know, that it happens, right? The person does, it works that way. But if they had no chance, then that's not right either.
Perfect. Yeah. Hey, so Larry, what about, as the seniors are getting ready to graduate, how do you think they should go about, or what advice would you give them as they go out there and they're trying to figure out, what company to work for?
That's amazing. It's an exciting time in life. I'll be out there in January, and my oldest will be touring Point Loma because she's really considering going there in about 18 months. And so I'm already going through, I can't believe I'm going to have a kid going to Point Loma here. But when they graduate, that's even crazier. Look, I think the biggest advice I could give a senior right now is you're gonna to find the really, really good job, you're gonna probably have to take a bit of chance, right? And when the chance I'm talking about is you're gonna probably have to maybe move where you don't want to move to, relocate. You're going to possibly take that job that no one else necessarily, it is not the most, I don't know what you're talking about. Let me talk about my own background. So when I graduated from Point Loma, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. You'll have more opportunity because the unemployment's so low. But I took a job in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. But I went directly into a personnel or human resource, basically management position straight out of college. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but I was able to do that because I relocated to somewhere that nobody else wanted to relocate to a place called Winnemucca, Nevada, which is out in the middle of podunk nowhere. I hope nobody's from there. Sorry if they are, but anyways, I stayed there about 6 years, and it was tough. But I did that, but I got a really big advance on my career. Matter of fact, that same company paid for my MBA. They paid 100% of my MBA because I went and worked there for a lot of years. So take the opportunity as they come, and you may have to relocate to that. Be open to relocation. Everybody wants to stay in San Diego, and I don't blame you. I would love to stay in San Diego, matter of fact. But my friends that stayed in San Diego while I was taking a HR management position, they were parking cars at the local restaurant just to stay in San Diego. And so as a valet, nothing wrong with being a valet, but the fact of the matter is, after you get your degree, you know what? You can do more than that, right? You can go out and find that more senior position, but you may have to be open to relocating. Now maybe later on you end up coming back to the place you want to go back to. So that would be one thing to do. Number two, a piece of advice is find that organization, if you can, that matches your values. And not all organizations are created equal. You really have to, that first job that comes to you may or may not be the right place for you. But find the values and find the position, find the boss that you can work for, and you'll know really soon whether you should be working for them or not. And so I think that's the two biggest pieces of advice I could give right now, just off the top of my head. And also, you're going to spend a lot of time at work, and you also think about this, right? Because you may go into a salaried position and you think about the number of hours that you're going to spend. And if you multiply that by the salary you're getting, just make sure that you're working for more than minimum wage, if that makes sense, right? Because you're going to be working a ton of hours. And if you divide that by the number of hours you're putting in, just make sure you're making above. Because what I've seen the companies do is they'll bring a graduate like you and they'll work them to death. And they'll put in tons and tons of hours. And so you might have to do that just to get your foot in the door, but make sure that that you find the right company that's gonna actually care for your development. It's great if a company does focus on development and development of their managers and development of their leadership, and see if you can't get into one of those programs that's going to develop you, because that will actually make a difference, and you'll prosper in those kind of companies. And to be quite honest, a group like you, with with the background you have, you're going to be needed in a lot of companies. So it's an exciting time for you guys that are seniors. It really is.
Any questions, thoughts?
Come here often?
No. The McLean was asking, do you come here often?
I get there as much as I can. I love San Diego. Luckily I'm only about 5 hours away, 5-6 hours away, and so I can drive over there. And so every time I can, I'm there about maybe every quarter, something like that. So
Lauren has a question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you got your MBA, and I was wondering if you felt like that helped you with other opportunities, or if you just went through the program because it was free and offered you to come here, if you saw any other benefits with it.
Could you hear her?
And just part of it, is it about the MBA?
Yeah. So her question was, is there a benefit to getting an MBA?
Yeah. So I think I have some strong views on that. Now, all my advice comes with a limited warranty. I always say it's very limited, so you can take it for what it's worth. I actually believe that an MBA is more valuable after you work for a while, and then go back and get your MBA, because you'll understand its application a lot better. So my advice is, work for 2 to 3 years, and then go back and get your MBA. Now, although a lot of people, go directly from their undergrad to their master's, and that's fine, but I always found that I had a lot more to apply to the MBA after 2 to 3 years of working. So that's one thing. The MBA, you know what it does? It actually gives you every job you go for, you're going against a stack of applicants. So I'll get a resume stack like this, okay? What's going to set you apart from all the rest, at first glance, going through resumes, is that master's degree. And so it helps you stand out among other applicants. It absolutely does. And so there is value to it. And I believe there's quite a bit of value to it. Now, it took me 4 years of working on my Fridays and Saturdays to get my MBA. And it took a lot of time away from the family. It took a lot of time away from, wife and everything else to get it. So there's a large price you pay for that MBA. Was it worth it? Yes. But I would consider it heavily with everything else you got going on. I do believe it sets you apart. And because of my MBA, I was giving opportunities to get jobs that I wouldn't have got otherwise, or wouldn't have been considered otherwise. And so, but I would do it 2 or 3 years after your undergrad. At least that's my opinion. Make sense?
Yeah, that was good. Any other questions? Hey, so Larry, well, you showed that stack of resumes, and I know, when I was working, I was looking at resumes, I could find something that, to weed out to exclude as opposed to keep in. So what do you look for in that stack of resumes that come through that to say, I'm not going to look at this one, but I will look at that one?
Yeah. So, it all depends on the position that we're searching for, but a lot of times what you're looking for is that solid background of a person working in in an organization with complexity. You're looking for the right degrees. You're looking for a person that hasn't skipped jobs every 6 months. At least that's my opinion. I mean, other people think that that's okay, but I like the person that stays in there, and shows that when the going gets tough, they stuck in there a little bit longer than usual. But having said that, I don't like the person necessarily that's been at one location for 30 years, because I don't see that diversity and richness in organizations. And so, you're looking for a variety of things, and it depends also on the position that you're looking for, what competencies. Now, you can't necessarily see competencies in a resume, but you can see whether a person has worked for a matrix organization, whether they've had to use influencing skills. Also, what you're looking for are, and I always like the resumes that have, and this can be a whole nother discussion on resumes, but resumes that have 4 or 5 bullet points up front of what you have delivered as an individual. What were you involved with? What did you deliver? And get those down to as numbers, metrics. How much money have you raised? How much capital have you been over? How many employees have you managed before? All these numerical kind of bullet points up front, in short little, I guess a summary, an executive summary. You don't want this resume to go on forever and ever. I mean, that first page really matters. The second and third page are rarely ever looked at. And so make that first page pop, and make sure that you have 4 or 5, critical items up front that you want to showcase. And even if you don't have that much of experience, you've been able to, go on mission trips before. You've had to be responsible for things. You've had to, do fundraisers before. You've had to volunteer before. All those are experiences that you can put on a resume in the first, section that shows, a summary of results, a summary of actions, summary of things that you've been responsible for that you can deliver. That stuff really matters.
Good deal. Alex, go ahead.
What was the biggest failure?
So Alex is asking, what is your biggest failure? And what did you learn from it?
We don't have enough time for all of them. Let's see. Wow. So my biggest, one of my biggest failures, I'll say what it was, and it has to do with Point Loma. And this is like, my gosh, I feel like I'm, confession here. One thing I didn't do was I made the JV basketball team at Point Loma. I played for Ben Foster for a while. And does anybody know that name, Ben Foster? I don't know if anybody knows that.
Oh, no, different crowd.
Different crowd. Ted Anderson. I don't know if Ted's still around, but Ted was the assistant coach. And so I played for a couple years. I got a scholarship there. And when it got really, really tough, and I had to set the bench, and I wasn't used to setting the bench because in high school I was like the superstar, and then I came to Point Loma and found out I was short. At 6'3", I was short. I quit the basketball team, and I regret that. And I should have stuck with it. And I think that I learned from that situation that I needed to have a little bit more grit. I needed to have a little bit more stick-to-itness. And I probably should have stuck in there and kept on going. But I did learn from that situation. And every once in a while I see Ted and I go, my gosh, I should have stuck in there. But matter of fact, oh my gosh, your groundskeeper, Steve. Yeah. I used to shave Steve's head when he was a senior in at Point Loma. That's kind of creepy and all, but that's what I use.
That's a good fun fact.
That's more information than you want to know. It's a little bit awkward, but anyways, I've done that before. Anyways, I was there when he broke the he broke a backboard when I was at that game.
Nice. Yeah. We'll Google that later. Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube it. You can YouTube it, and you'll see Steve Riddle break a backboard.
All right. Alex this is our last question. Alex has the last question.
Sure.
Has he ever put family or work before family? And if so, like, how has he managed family and work? Because he's in so many different countries.
Yeah. So Alex's question is, have you put work before family, and how do you balance that work-family relationship?
I wish I could sit here and say that I've never put work before family, but I'd be lying to you guys. I have, because I used to travel probably over 50% of my time because I was traveling long hauls. I've got over 1 million miles with American. Wow. And I don't say that because I'm bragging. I said that because I did put probably too much work before family at some stage in my career. And I think it is a tough balance. It really is a tough balance to keep that just right. Having said that, I'm very mindful, and I have a wife that's very understanding, and she's up there with Mother Teresa in forgiving things, I think. And so we've been able to work through things, and I've been able to keep things in perspective, and it really is important to think about, what's really important. Is this next promotion, or is it spending, more time with that kid that's just about to go into, university or leave or that baby that, you need to be there for that birth of that baby. And, I know that it's really important that you're at that conference and that you're, delivering that paper at that conference, but, who's going to be there with your, making those decisions are life decisions. Now, balance, I don't know if there is this thing called balance, but the fact of the matter is every balance is different for every family, and every person has to make that personal decision about what's right for them and their family. And, but you definitely have to keep things in perspective, and I've not always kept things in perspective. And so, you have to learn from those things, and you have to make sure that you make the better decisions for the future. And so I've done that as well. My gosh, I feel like this is some kind of a, confession.
Point Loma,
exactly. So, but there is definitely going to be time for career, and I do believe that family has to come first. And that's after your faith, I think, comes number one. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Larry. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I wish I was there in person, and maybe in January when I'm wandering around the campus, if you see me and my daughter doing a tour, that I hope you stop me and say hi. Okay.
All right. We'll see you, Larry. Thank you.
Bye-bye now. See you.